Hello, everyone coming in the room. We'll start in about 5 minutes. We're just waiting for the room to get filled up, and we will be starting. Thank you guys for coming in and joining us today. Thanks for everyone just joining us and coming in. I'll be starting at about 3 minutes, just waiting for a couple of people to get into the room. Make sure we get maximum participation. Thank you guys for participating and joining us today. We'll be starting in just about 2-3 minutes. Things to take care of before we continue. Let's see here. My name is Ronald Shannon, and I am the Health Impact Specialist for UCHAPS. UCHAPS is the Urban Coalition for HIV/AIDS Prevention Services, and we are a coalition of community-based organizations and local health departments that we partner together to do the work surrounding HIV and AIDS and ending the epidemic. All right. All lines are going to be remain muted during the webinar. If you have any questions, we're going to ask that you put them in the question and answer box, which is here where that green arrow is pointed. You can type it in, and at the end of the webinar, I will call out those questions to the appropriate person, or you can also put them in our chat feature box, and someone from UCHAPS will definitely make sure that we get those read out for you guys. So you have two options, either the Q&A box or the chat box. You can put your questions or concerns. If you have any incidents like you can't hear me or anything like that, just make sure you put that in either one of those boxes, and we will make sure we get those addressed for you. Our speakers today, which I'm really excited about, we have Earl Folks, who is the president and CEO for Center for Black Equity, and then we've got Dr. Helen Holton, which is the executive director for the National Organization of Black County Officials. I'm really excited to hear what they have to say today for you guys, and we are going to jump right in, and we're going to go ahead and hand the mic over to Earl and let him get started. I'm going to unmute you now, Earl.
Thank you, Ronald. Okay, am I heard?
Yes, you're.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. So it's a pleasure to be on this UCHAPS call. Also, it's a pleasure to be in the call with my colleague, Dr. Holton, who served many years as elected official in Baltimore. My perspective is one of, especially in regards to HIV/AIDS, comes from experience dealing back from the 90s, the early 90s, as dealing with Ryan White when the legislation was passed. And for the first time when Ryan White was passed, it had provided an opportunity for regular citizens, people impacted and infected and affected by HIV/AIDS, to participate in decisions about how health care would be delivered and health services would be delivered, and the distribution of resources to impacted communities. And this caused a lot of stress at first because people were not used to talking to their elected officials. And when I say elected officials, I also include those who are appointed by the mayors. You may not talk to the mayor of your city, but if you're talking to the head of the health department, you're talking to the mayor's representative. So when I say elected, it's not all people who are elected, it's the people who are elected and appointed by an elected official. Next slide, please. So these are my experiences of communicating with elected and appointed officials. I was vice chair of and then I became chair of the Hudson County, New Jersey HIV/AIDS Services Planning Council. It was a Ryan White Title I city. I was also chair of the Hudson County Human Relations Council. I co-chaired the DC HIV/AIDS Prevention Community Planning Group for 4 years. I'm currently the chair of the Commission on Human Rights, and I chair the Democratic National Committee's LGBT caucus. And I've been the executive director of 3 AIDS service organizations. So I've had lots of opportunity to engage public officials, basically to either encourage more funding or allocation of funding or participation by people who are impacted and affected by the HIV/AIDS pandemic to councils, or just general policy. It was a number of things. It wasn't always asking for money, but it was also asking for opportunities to present my case to people who had the money, but also engaging the community and allowing the community to tell the elected officials and appointed officials how they saw what they saw was the best strategies of doing prevention and care in their community. And this was something that was very new when it first started. Next slide, please. So these are my tips from my experience for communicating with elected officials. And I preface this by saying, my way of doing it is not the only way. There are many ways of doing it. This was effective for the roles that I had, but sometimes there were some other, even radical approaches to getting elected officials to listen to you. But these are the ways that I felt that were most effective for the work I was doing. And so it's just my opinion is not universally accepted, but this is how I believe it works. First of all, elected officials like to talk to constituents. Register to vote. It's a very simple process in most places, but the first thing that comes out of your mouth when you meet an elected official and you introduce yourself is, I'm Earl Folks, I'm registered in district, and I live in Washington, D.C., so I'm registered in Ward 6. And when I'm speaking to my Ward 6 council member, he's speaking to a constituent. That's very important. And also shows that I care enough about the process, whatever I think of the process, I care about the electoral process to participate. Secondly, identify who your local and county, statewide, and national level representatives are. Most people, in my experience, don't know who their city council person is, don't know who their county commissioner is. They very rarely know they may know the governor, but they may not know the lieutenant governor, who sometimes sits on panels and has influence. They may not know who the chief justice is. They may not know any of these people. They're congressmen, they're senators. It's important to identify who these people are and their party affiliation and what they do and for the community. And the other thing is, go to their website, read about them, know who they are. They may be your neighbor. I actually found at one time that I was living next to my city council person in New Jersey. They may be your neighbor. Subscribe to their mailing list and listserv so you can find out what they're thinking. And that leads to my next point. You need to understand what the legislative priorities are and focus. So if your city council person is into criminal justice, and that's what he or she has made their #1 priority, then you can talk about, if in most states and most communities, unfortunately, we have the criminalization of HIV/AIDS, you may bring in the talk of AIDS from that standpoint. They may be a housing. One of my at-large city council person is a housing expert. Her priority is legislative priority is housing. Of course, people living with HIV/AIDS need housing. There's HAPWA that's underfunded. We usually have a backlog of affordable housing for people living with HIV/AIDS. So that may be your entry into talking to them about HIV/AIDS. But you need to understand what their priorities are. Now, just because their priorities are not your priorities doesn't mean they should listen to you and they shouldn't support you. But if you understand what the legislative priorities are, it's a foot in the door, and it helps you get into the door so you can present your case. Next slide, please. The other thing is be visible. Don't just show up to protest. Go to most elected officials now have community town halls and open houses. The community town halls, they usually have it's a free-flowing event, usually in the evening, usually in the district, almost always in the district. And they allow people they present their priorities and how their legislative accomplishments, and they allow the common citizens, regular folks, to stand up and voice their opinions. Sometimes they'll have open houses in their in City Hall or wherever their office is, and people can come by and visit and just chit chat. And this allows you to do the second point is acquaint yourself with the staff. Everyone wants to talk to the elected official, but in my opinion, oftentimes the power and the access to the elected official is through their scheduler, their chief of staff, their policy person. Get to know the staff, because the reality is when something happens that you're interested in, or you want to push something or influence a vote or whatever it is, you're not going to get a chance to speak to that elected official, but the chances are much greater that you'll get a chance to speak to the scheduler or the chief of staff or the policy person. Make friends with them. Don't harass them, but make yourself available to them to talk about, to present your priorities and your agenda. But the staff is key. Be nice to the staff. They're often the gatekeepers to the door that allows you into the elected official. Whether it's right or wrong, they control what messages go through to the elected official from the public. Oftentimes they don't do it, the door is not open wide enough, but that there is an opportunity for you to get to know these people and to be in friendly terms with these people. The other thing is find out what committees your elected representative sits on. And your elected representative may not sit on the committee that you may be interested in, but he has other colleagues who are also, may not be your person in your district, but the person who handles health issues may not be your elected official. But who is the person on the city council or city hall who handles those things? Get to know that person, find out be familiar with the work. Again, it feeds back into understanding their agenda and the legislative focus. And so you're not wasting your time and going to meetings that are not important and not going to get you anywhere. But that elected official could elect you to introduce you to another elected official who handles the issue you're dealing with. Or that staffer, all those chiefs of staff, they know each other. All the schedulers, they all know each other. So your person who's an elected official may not be the person you need to speak to, but if you speak to that scheduler and he says, well, you know what? I know the person who's scheduler for Representative XYZ. Let me give you the information. You can speak to them. You just need a pathway to where you need to go. And it comes in many different forms, but be nice to people and be nice to that scheduler, because they know all the other schedulers and all the other elected officials in town. And also the other thing is oftentimes we go in with our agendas kind of free flowing. Be specific about what you want from your elected official. What is it that what are the 3 or 4 priorities you need? And be clear. If you're going to say there's a problem with something, what are your solutions? Because oftentimes we're excellent at identifying problems, but we're not so great at identifying solutions. And there's a belief that elected officials have all the answers to all the problems, and that's not necessarily true. You may have the solution, and you may need, to have that elected official enact your solution, but be clear about what you want from your elected official and have a clear agenda. Next slide, please. And it goes back to having a clear agenda. What's your 30-second elevator speech? Have one prepared, because you may see your elected official or a staff person in the elevator going up to City Hall, and you're going to the 5th floor and they're going to the 3rd floor. What are you going to say to them if you recognize them in 30 seconds? And have your facts in order. Don't make up facts. If you don't know what's the proportion of women who are HIV positive in your community, don't make something up. Have your facts. Read the CDC reports. Read your state reports. Read your local city or county reports. Know your facts, because the last thing that is going to turn a person off, the first thing that's going to turn a person off, is someone coming in and throwing out figures and they're not true, and they just seem crazy because you can't think of it. If you can't think of the facts, don't use statistics. But you need to know your basic statistics about the population that you're working to serve and to help. So get your facts in order. Don't get too overwhelming, but have your 30-second speech ready and have some facts in there. And again, I'm repeating some stuff, but speak to your elected representative from the position of being a constituent. As an executive director of agencies, sometimes, I would be hesitant to identify myself as a voter, because I felt that saying that I was the executive director had more weight. Well, in DC, we have 10,000 nonprofits. And so we have lots of executive directors running around this town. So what distinguishes me, it makes me different from the other executive directors when I'm speaking to my local official. I'm going to tell him, I live in your ward. These are your ward problems, and these are my solutions that I think that you should be looking at to resolve these ward problems. We have a tremendous homelessness issue in Washington, D.C. And there are many, and those of you who do HIV/AIDS work, you know that many of our clients are in different stages of homelessness. So that's your entry point, to talk about HIV/AIDS from a standpoint of being a homeless person. If our clients are homeless, they can't get their food, they can't take their medicine, they can't get their checks oftentimes. We can't do anything for them. How are we going to address those issues? So it's not just addressing people who are HIV positive, it's addressing all people in homelessness, but you're standing up for people who are HIV positive. So, but come as a constituent, and if you're not a constituent of that district, for example, if the chair of the health commission, the health committee is in District 7, you live in District 6, it doesn't preclude you going to talk to someone in District 7, but bring a person who is from District 7 to also speak, and allow them to speak. So you're helping them to empower themselves by speaking to an elected representative, but you can speak to that other district representative, but it's more powerful if you bring someone who is a constituent from that district, so you can help them explain what their needs are. Next slide, please. And in closing, these are 4 things I think are very, very important. Tell your story. Don't be afraid of your story. That's key. If you are a person living with HIV/AIDS and you have struggled through with homelessness, and you have struggled through without having enough resources to live and live a healthy lifestyle, be prepared to tell your story. The most effective story is one that's from the personal standpoint and from the heart. Be honest. Don't make up stuff. Most politicians can read through that very easily. Just be honest and be straightforward. Don't waste, and be polite. Now, there are other people who believe that sometimes being polite is not the best way, and they have used other methods of getting their stories heard and their information to their elected officials. Those people are fine. Everyone can't be those people. Someone has to be the polite one. Someone has to be the one opening the door, and someone has to be the one screaming outside the door that the door should be open. Pick your role, but be polite. And the last thing is, don't waste time. No long-winded soliloquies. No long stories. If you can't say your story in a minute or 2, then it's too long. Don't waste time. Don't waste elected officials' time. Don't always try to buttonhole them every time you see them. If there's a long line, that may not be the opportunity to speak to them. You may need a private audience. And if the elected official is not able to see you and says, see my chief of staff, then don't take that as an insult. Understand that he's very busy or she's very busy, and that he'll get the information from one of his staff people. So those are the 4 things that I would say that have been useful to me, and I think they can be useful if applied appropriately. I will stay on for calls afterwards. And this is my contact information if you want to ask me some questions or engage me in other ways. It's efolks@centerforblack.equity.org. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Earl. I really appreciate you giving those tips and pointers for everyone. I do see your hand, Carlton. I will get to your, once we get at the end of the webinar, I'll call out any questions that you guys have. Just type them in the question and answer box. I see you doing that now. Great. And once we get, once at the end of the webinar, I will call out those questions and get everything answered for you guys. And again, Earl, thank you so much for coming on and giving those great tips out for everyone. And next, we are going to talk to Dr. Helen Holton, and she's going to come on next. Dr. Holton, it's up. You're up.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. This is a topic that I have spent more than 2 decades of my life living through and continue to do so as the Executive Director of the National Organization of Black County Officials. I want to thank UCHAPS for offering this webinar, because I think that most people who want to engage the process of governance of elected and appointed officials don't, simply because they don't know how, or they go about it in a way that does not yield the results they're looking for. So let's just jump out this way. Next slide, please. Effective engagement with elected officials is a marathon, not a sprint. So let's go back a slide. And so if you want to really be effective in your engagement with elected officials, you need to understand it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. As Earl was saying, you want to get to know your elected officials, not in the heat of a crisis when you need them, but you want to get to know them because they represent you. So whether you're an active voter or not, an active participant in the electoral process, it doesn't change the role of the elected or appointed official being responsive to you. So what does that mean? It means that I hope that you're an active and participative voter in the electoral process, but if you're not, it doesn't mean that that official is not there to help you as well. Also, when you think about it, so I represented, when I first got elected to office, I was one of 3 representatives at the local level, and our district had over 100,000 citizens. So there was 3 of us and over 100,000 people. Clearly, everyone, there's not enough hours in the day for everyone to have FaceTime with that elected official. So you want to know the go-to people on the official's staff or their team. And for us, it was city or county officials. I served on the Baltimore City Council for 21 years. But what that means is, as Earl mentioned earlier, okay, so maybe the elected or appointed official isn't available, but their staff are offering you to speak with or meet with someone else on the team. Don't take that as a rejection. And don't be so quick to say, no, I want my representative. If you are serious about your intention of connecting with them, you'll get some results. So whether it's the chief of staff, maybe it is a staff person that handles certain areas, whether it's health, HIV-related, whether it's budget or tax related, whether it's school related. You know, at the end of the day, all politics really are local. And so it's not as if you're looking at engaging with someone that is foreign from your needs, because they should live in your community and be available to you when you call on them. community, engagement of your organization or you as an individual is an internal process. So in the case of Earl, president of Centers for Black Equity, as an organization, it's important that you practice inclusion within your organization. Because at the end of the day, whatever you're seeking to get done is going to have implications or impact for everybody within that district, state, or the country. So as I said, all politics are local. And what that means is there are very few laws that reach Congress that did not begin in a local community. So you're right where you need to be. You're where the rubber meets the road, and beginning that process with your local elected official is important. And I can't stress enough the importance of knowing who your representatives are from the city, county, state, and federal level. Next slide, please. Present your concern or issue in a one-page executive summary. So I would say, never go to a meeting with your elected representative or appointed representative without something in writing. You want to be able to leave something behind. I can tell you there are countless meetings I've had where people came in to see me and they came with themselves and they wanted to talk about their issue. Now, I'm not the best note taker, I confess, but I do scribble and jot down some notes, and sometimes there's a staff person in the room taking notes. But that takeaway after you're gone, you want something for that official to remember what your meeting was about. And the reason I say a one-page executive summary, now you can have more information that you bring along to support what you're presenting in that executive summary. But I promise you this, officials don't have a lot of time to read through volumes and volumes and volumes of paper. And oftentimes it gets relegated to a staff person to go through what's in the detail. What is powerful is that during that meeting with that one-page executive summary, where you're highlighting the key reasons why you wanted that meeting, is going to help that official that even when you're meeting with them, their mind begins to churn. Okay, is this in my domain, or does it need to go to someone else? Maybe I need to, it's not in my committee that I chair or that I sit on, and I need to be able to have information that I can share to the appropriate party. Maybe it's not even a local issue. Maybe it's a state issue. Maybe it's a federal issue. So the more information you can provide in writing means that you're helping that official get you closer to an answer or to address your issue or concern. And so, I mean, I've had people come in to see me with so much paper and not organized. You know, I received their papers, and I'm going to say this on the record. It's great when you go out and get people to sign petitions, or you send around form letters and you say, oh, just sign at the bottom. We're bundling these letters. That's great information. But very few officials have the time to, number one, verify the information that it's coming from legitimate people. And it doesn't take a lot. There's not a lot of momentum behind doing petitions. You do better to come in, as Earl was saying, with, number one, a citizen from the district of the person that you're going to visit, and having people share their stories or experiences. But be brief, because you probably won't get more than 30 minutes, an hour, 50 minutes to an hour max that you're going to have time with that official. Next slide. Use technology responsibly. What does that mean in a time when we live where people are on social media? Well, if you're out there on social media, sometimes there's just too much information you're putting out there. And if you want to be taken seriously, be very clear. The staffers in that official's office, they're going to go and look at who is this person? And if it appears that you're not going to be the kind of person that's coming to work on solutions, but to harp on challenges and problems, it might take you a while to get your meeting. And so you need to be mindful of that. At the same token, it might be a great opportunity to take a picture and say, hey, here's my official working with us to solve our problem. You draw far more flies with honey than vinegar. Now, that's not to say there aren't times when you come with a valid argument or issue that you want to bring before that official. But you want to make sure when you bring it that you're working to build bridges and alliances, because being fly in the ointment, being vinegar, salt on the wound isn't necessarily going to get your issue the attention it warrants or deserves. And so being mindful of that you're going there to get some answers, to get some help to the issue or problem you're facing. You won't get it if you walk in the door with an attitude of, I voted for you and this is your job and you need to be responsive to me. That may all well be true, but you're not going to get much good results when you go in with that type of attitude. Next slide, please. Listen, and listen well before jumping to judgment. It's real easy to be, you're going to that meeting because you've tried everything they say you're supposed to do and it's not getting you the results, and you want to go in there and give somebody your peace of mind. I get that. I've been there. Be more curious and less critical, especially if you're not familiar with the process of government and what it takes and the time it takes for real change to come about. It's not always as easy as saying, oh, okay, we can fix that by tomorrow. And keep your emotions in check. It's good to be passionate about an issue. It's good to display that, but you don't want to become so volatile that the official's feeling like, maybe we need to call security. Is this going to be a problem? And there's some issues today that can get you to that place, but don't let it hinder your opportunity to make things happen. Oftentimes when you go meet with an official at their place, it's during the day. Now, as a local representative, I spend a lot of time in meetings in the evening after hours, because that's when most citizens are available to meet with their official, whether it's at an organized meeting outside of the place of government, or whether it's in the place of government, at a hearing even. Be more curious and less critical. Ask questions. Find out what that official knows. Find out if they're interested in this subject. And understand they don't have to be interested. It's helpful if they are interested since they're representing you. But you want to make sure that you give them some information without harping on what they didn't do or how they're not supporting you. That's not the intent of what you're looking to do. You're coming with a serious issue or concern that you need to have resolved. And when you think about what's happening in the recent actions of the epidemic of HIV, let's be clear. We need to be level-headed and focus on the present moment of how we will address and respond to information that seems to be counter to where it is we're looking to go, or information that is conflicted with, you say you're going to end it by 2030, but you're taking the resources away to help make that happen. How is that possible? Be curious. Next slide, please. Earl mentioned earlier, being polite. Practice kindness and civility. At the end of the day, you're speaking to another human being. When you strip away titles and positions and roles, it boils down to people having a conversation. Courtesy and compassion are powerful tools that you can take into a meeting. First of all, you're going to help that official not feel like they're on the defense. You don't want to necessarily walk in the door putting them on the hot seat. The fact that you have this issue or concern that's bringing you there, it may be because of an action that they took that you feel like, hey, why'd you do that? Going back to curiosity, understand all the things that come into play. Being courteous automatically relaxes the position that an official comes in. And in today's political climate, I just have to tell you, when officials schedule meetings and things, they're bracing for the worst. So if you walk in being courteous and compassionate, you're going to allow them to be relaxed and really focus on how they can help you with your issue. Isn't that what you want after all? And understand, compromise is not a dirty word. You can come in saying, I want resources to do more testing. And no is not an acceptable answer. Well, you're not leaving any room for compromise. What you might want to do is go in and say, how can we go about getting more resources for testing? Or having extended hours at the clinic that provides PrEP and PEP. You know, these types of things come about by being engaged in the dialogue together and being open to out-of-the-box thinking. And how can we create a win-win for both sides so that, number one, we're moving closer to the outcome that you came to address, but number two, you're working within the parameters of saying, hey, I need you, official, to be on my side, to hear what we want to have accomplished and find ways to get things done. Next slide. So this is our website, and you can go to our website. We always have information and news out there for you to find. It's www.nobco.org. And we're in social media, so you can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and we have a Facebook page. And we're always pumping out information. If you'd like to be added to our listserv, please go to our website and sign up so that you can be aware of what we're doing throughout the country. We work with county officials from east to west and north to south, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific, from the Canadian border all the way to the ends of the United States. But we are here to represent you, to hear your issues, to be engaged with you as we make life better for all citizens, because it takes all of us working together to make it work. And so effectively engaging your elected officials is not difficult. It just requires consistency. It requires consideration, courtesy, and participation. So I thank you. I'm Dr. Helen Holton, Executive Director, National Organization of Black County Officials, and welcome your questions and comments.
Thank you, Dr. Holton and Earl, so much for those for that feedback and information that we got from you guys. We are opening up the floor for questions. Does anybody have any questions? You can type them into our question box. I just want to give a quick overview of just for some key takeaways that we got from Earl. We got get acquainted with staff, make sure you come with a clear agenda and come as a constituent. Dr. Holton for some great points of practice inclusion within your organization. Make sure you leave something behind. Come with that one-page executive summary. Also use technology responsibly. That's something I think we're all learning as public health professionals is learning to use that tool. And both of you guys gave great pointers on being practicing kindness and listening to the messages that your politicians are giving you guys so that you can make sure that you're coming correctly. I do have a question for the floor, and this question is actually for both of you guys. Can one of, or either one of you can answer, can one of you give an example of a time you had a successful interaction with a constituent or a community-based organization? And what did that interaction look like?
Yes, this is Dr. Helen. I've had quite a few. So I will tell you, one of them was addressing addressing how we were going to, addressing youth investment. Young people, along with community-based organizations, were looking at the lack of after-school opportunities for young people. And it's an interesting issue to take up because, you know, the most critical hours in the lives of a young person between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. And so when we look at the spread of HIV and we look at where you don't have constructive things for young people to do, you're inviting them to do things unstructured without information that they may not know about. And so we were able to, in the city of Baltimore, successfully get past a fund for youth investment, creating an opportunity for greater after-school mentoring and out-of-school work opportunities for young people in the city of Baltimore, and it's still in place today.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Dr. Holton, for that question. Our next question is coming from Julia Oach. She's asking, if approaching a state public health official, do you think it makes sense to have legislative support before or after? And that's to either one of you.
Well, this is Dr. Holton, one who's interacted with state officials on a regular. If it's a piece of legislation you want support from, if you're going to the state level, you might want to make sure you've got support from your local officials so that when you go there, that's one piece that's added to the group that you're traveling with to go and advocate for that. So whether it is if it's a city or county-wide issue, you want to make sure you've got some of those county officials on board with you. If it is a district issue, you want to make sure that they're aware of, yes, I know it's not a local issue, that it's a state issue, but I do have the support of the local officials behind us as we go forward to get traction at the state level.
This is Earl. That's a good question because it's like what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And actually, you need both. You should always be taking the opportunity to educate your public health officials and your legislative representatives. I remember when I was in New Jersey when we had when harm reduction, which is considered quite normal nowadays in our field in HIV/AIDS, was very new. And the fact of getting needle exchange was a very, very, very emotional issue for people who are in recovery, for people who were actively using. There was a lot of judgment, and a lot of the opposition didn't come from the people you think would be the opponents. And you really have to spend a lot of time to gain support. You have to educate people and be patient with people. And Dr. Holton is correct that you got to be patient. People are going to, why should they give up the needles? You're spreading the addiction. And actually what needle exchange did, and we all come to accept it as fact now, is it reduced the rate of IV drug needle exchange, IV drug needles, passing HIV/AIDS through IV drugs, needles. And so I think that getting support has to be done with education. You're not going to get support until you educate people, and that's going to take a while. So as issues come up, you should be constantly gaining support for your issues before they even become a public health situation. You should be always educating because Dr. Holt is correct. We assume that all of our elected officials know everything that's going on in our district and in the districts we live in, and oftentimes they don't know, and their staff doesn't know, and the people around them don't know. And as constituents and as activists, we have to educate people. And that takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of patience, but it pays off when people have the facts. Eventually in Jersey City and in Hudson County, we were able to get needle exchange, but it took a lot of educating, a lot of patience, a lot of hand-holding, a lot of coming back and asking them to think about it and bringing facts and bringing constituents and bringing experts in, and finally needle exchange took place. But you need to be gaining your support before, after, and during.
And you know what? This goes back to the point I said, effective engagement is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so when you know you have real issues to address, don't feel like one meeting is going to get it resolved. You need to continue the process until you get to a place where you feel like something is happening, we're getting it done, we're moving the needle forward. But it takes time.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, guys. Any more questions for you guys? I got one more question I'm going to read out, and then I just wanted to see if anybody else had any other questions before we continue to go ahead and see one more popping in. See what that, how long should you wait? Should you wait for answers to your engagement? That's from Carlton Smith.
You know, this is Earl. Like, it's very, you know, building relationships is, as Dr. Holton says, and that's why she was reelected 7 times. She was reelected 6 times. It's a marathon, and the fact of the matter is that you're going to have situations where your elected official or a public official or appointed official is not going to be responsive to the issues that are important to you. And that's very, very frustrating. And what happens is the longer we go through this process, the less civility this exists. And people aren't polite anymore. And then you become screaming and nothing happens and you're in a stalemate. And you can't answer the question. I believe that any issue that I'm working on is for the long haul. And if it takes me 10 years to get to the point I need to get to, it's going to take me 10 years. And I'm going to work every option. And I'm going to develop relationships and allies with other constituency organizations and other activists. The key is if a state public official is not responding to you appropriately, then his boss is usually the governor, or thereabouts. And you have to be working all angles, and it's not just working the state officials. What kind of relationships do you have with elected officials? Because the pressure may not be can come from you, it may be coming from someone else in another arena. It may be coming from the governor, it may be coming from another appointed official. But you know, you have to work all your angles, and you have to be patient.
Yes, I would agree with that. And I just want to make one distinction, and this is one that people often, I had someone who was upset as I was sharing with them that what they wanted to have happen, the law did not permit, and there would most likely not be a law put in place to address it. And they said to me, well, I'm going to call the mayor on you and report you. And I thought to myself, well, you can certainly call the mayor and do that, but the mayor's not my boss. And so you need to understand, this goes back to knowing the players. If someone is elected to office, their boss are the people they represent. If they're an appointed official, then their boss is the person who appointed them. And so understanding that distinction, if an elected official isn't doing the bidding that you want for them, then the only way to get them out of that position is to vote them out of office. And so now we're coming back around to participating in the electoral process. If you don't vote, your voice really doesn't have much place to resonate in terms of bringing change about. Because it's the voters that put electeds in office. And not, and unfortunately, our nation is governed by the minority voice because the majority of people aren't participating in the process of voting and electing representatives that are going to do the bidding for the things that we want to have happen.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Holton. Let's see. Another question we have here is, given what you just said, Dr. Holton, are there any checks and balances that are in place that we can participate in if we feel like we aren't, outside of the participating in the electoral process during the term of that elected official? Is there a check balance that we can use to kind of get ourselves a little bit heard a little bit more, or to draw more attention to the fact that we aren't being heard?
Certainly. And, every piece of legislation that's introduced is supposed to have a hearing, and hearings are public. And so organizing and getting people who are like-minded with you on an issue having them come and show up at the hearings, having them contact, if it's your local city or county, you know, showing up at those meetings and participating in those hearings and making phone calls and sending letters, not a form letter, but sending letters for or against an issue. This is where social media can be for good to share, hey, we think this issue is important to our community, but we don't seem to be able to get any traction from our elected or appointed official. You know, how does this measure up for you? You know, spreading the word. There's power in numbers. Collectively, we are stronger than we are individually. And so building those coalitions and finding other organizations that maybe are not like yours, but have similar interest in what you're doing and building capacity that way. Absolutely.
And I would add, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. And if you're going to go to a hearing and you have partners coming with you, and you're talking about HIV/AIDS and women, for example, make sure you have women there. Make sure that you have the a cross section of the population you're talking about, and don't all come saying the same thing. Make certain that you have a strategy of your messaging, and it may be having a conference call or sitting together and planning out, so you're not all saying the same thing. But the visual optics and the messaging is so clear, because you also want to bring that into the media. You want this to be a hearing. Most hearings, like in Washington, D.C., committee hearings, public hearings, or on television, you know, what are the optics are you going to bring about? What's the messaging? Who's going to be speaking? Is the community that is impacted represented appropriately? It's like talking about women's issues and not having women there, or talking about youth issues and not having youth there. So it's very important that you really look at this in a very structural way and do some serious coalition building, but do some planning on your messaging.
Absolutely. You know, there's nothing, organize. You can go to a public hearing and have one person speak and 100 people in the room holding signs that all say the same thing. Be very clear. Those officials sitting in the front of the room will get the message.
All right, awesome. Thank you both, Dr. Holton and Earl, folks, for those answers and for the presentation today. I know I scribbled down a lot of notes, and I hope everyone was able to take away some good information from you guys. The presentation and slides will be available within 24 hours on the UCHAPS resource website, on Resource Center. And if you have some other resources that you like to check out of ours, we have a UCHAPS legislative guide, which will be very helpful and befitting for the topic that we're talking about today. And then we also got a nonprofit and advocacy piece that you guys webinar online that you guys can also take advantage of and use. Our upcoming presentations that we're continuing our talk on our national campaign, how national campaigns can improve public health messaging using modern technology. We've got Trina Scott, which is the national campaign manager for Greater Than AIDS. She's going to give us some great information about how to use that campaign and in combination with social media to engage certain audiences. And then we've got Jonathan Likes, who is the Black Youth Project. 100. BYP 100. I'm sorry, excuse me. The full name is BYP 100. He's from, and he will be speaking to us about engaging youth, Black youth, and using social media. So we definitely look forward to that. And we also have a message received workshop that's coming up on March 27th. You guys can show up that you can sign up for. That's actually here physically at the UCHAPS office on site from 12:30 to 4:30. And you need to pre-register for that, and Inez will be facilitating that session. We hope to see you guys here for that as well. And let's see what else. There will be a brief survey that pops up in the 3 questions in a few seconds. Once this is over, if you guys can fill it out and give us feedback, it really helps us out here in UCHAPS when we're making out these webinars for you guys and for future references. If you don't get it, please make sure you send me an email at ronald@uchaps.com, and again, we at uchaps.org, and we appreciate everyone for participating today, and we will see you guys at our next event. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Oh, end the meeting.